The senator from Oklahoma.
Madam President, I was interested the other day when I heard that the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, Crown Prince Abdullah, made a statement, and it was received by many in this country as if it was a statement of fact, as if it was something new, as if it was a concept for peace in the Middle East that no one's ever heard of before. And I was kind of shocked that it was so well received by many people who have been down this road before. I suggest to you, Madam President, that what Prince Abdullah, Crown Prince Abdullah, talked about a few days ago was not new at all. He talked about the fact that they should, and I'll read this now, the Abdullah plan, Arabs would normalize relations with Israel in exchange for the Jewish state surrendering the territory seized after the 1967 Six-Day War, as if that was something that was new. They went on to talk about other land that had been acquired and had been taken by Israel. And I remember so well, just a few days ago, on December 4th, we covered all of this. The fact that there isn't anything new about the prospect of giving up land is rightfully Israel's land in order to have peace. When it gets right down to it, the land doesn't really make that much difference because Yasser Arafat and others don't recognize Israel's right to any of the land. They don't recognize Israel's right to exist. Now, I'll discuss 7 things that I mentioned once before, reasons why Israel is entitled to the land that they have and that should not be a part of any of the peace process. Now, it's obvious if this is something that Israel wants to do, that's their business to do it. But I think anyone who's trying to put the pressure on Israel to do this is wrong. Now, we're going to be hit by skeptics who are going to say that we're being attacked all because of our support for Israel. And if we get out of the Middle East, that's us, all the problems will go away. And that's just not so. It's not true. If we withdraw, all these problems will again come to our door. And I have some observations to make about that. But I'd like to really just re-emphasize once again the 7 reasons that Israel has the right to their land. The first reason is that Israel has the right to the land because of all the archaeological evidence. This is reason number 1. It all supports it. Every time there's a dig in Israel, it does nothing but support the fact that Israelis have had a presence there for over 3,000 years. They've been there for a long time. The coins, the cities, the pottery, all these things that come up in the digs, the culture, there are other groups there, but there's no mistake the fact that the Israelis have been present in that land for 3,000 years. It predates any claims that other peoples have in the regions that they might have. The ancient Philistines are extinct. Many other ancient peoples are extinct. They do not have the unbroken line to this date that the Israelis have. Even the Egyptians of today are not Egyptians as they were 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. They're primarily an Arab people today. The land is called Egypt, but they're not the same racial or ethnic stock as the old Egyptians of the ancient world. The Israelis are in fact descended from the original Israelites. The first proof then is archaeology. The second proof of Israel's right to the land is its historic right. History supports it totally and completely. We know there has been in Israel up to and until the time of the Roman Empire. The Romans conquered the land. Israel had no homeland, although Jews were allowed to live there. They were driven from the land in 2 dispersions. One was 770 AD and one was 135 AD, but there's always been a Jewish presence in that land. The Turks, who took over about 700 years ago and ruled the land up until World War I, had control. Then the land was conquered by the British. The Turks entered World War I on the side of Germany. The British knew they had to do something to punish Turkey and also to break up that empire that was going to be part of the whole effort of Germany in World War I. So the British sent troops against the Turks in the Holy Land. One of the generals who was leading the British armies was a general by the name of Allenby. Allenby was a Bible-believing Christian. He carried a Bible with him everywhere he went. He knew the significance of Jerusalem. The night before the attack against Jerusalem to drive out the Turks, Allenby prayed that God would allow him to capture the city without doing damage to the holy places. That day, Allenby sent World War I biplanes over the city of Jerusalem to do a reconnaissance mission. Now, you have to understand that the Turks had never seen an airplane before. So there they were, flying around. They looked in the sky and they saw these fascinating inventions and did not know what they were, and they were terrified of them. Then they were told that they're going to be opposed by a man named Allenby. Allenby the next day, which means, in their language, man sent from God or a prophet from God. They dared not fight against a prophet from God, so the next morning when Allenby went to take Jerusalem, he went in and captured it without firing a single shot. The British government was grateful to Jewish people around the world, and particularly to one Jewish chemist who helped them manufacture niter. Niter is an ingredient that was used in nitroglycerin. It had been sent over here from the New World, but they didn't have a way of doing it. The German U-boats were shooting down the boats, and so most of the niter that they're trying to import to make nitroglycerin was down at the bottom of the ocean. But a man named Weitzman, a chemist, a Jewish chemist, discovered a way to make it from materials that existed in England. And as a result of that, they were able to continue that supply. The homeland that Britons and the British at that time said that they were going to give the Jewish people a homeland. And that's all a part of history. It's all written down in the history. They're also gratified that the Jewish people came through and helped finance the war, and the bankers helped finance the war, and it was working out very well. The homeland that Britain said it would set aside consisted of all of what is now Israel and all of what then was the nation of Jordan, the whole thing. That was what Britain promised to give the Jews in 1917. In the beginning, there was some Arab support for this. There was not a huge Arab population in the land at that time, and there's a reason for that. The land was not able to sustain a large population of people. It just didn't have the development it needed to handle these people, and the land wasn't really wanted by anybody. Nobody really wanted this land. It was considered to be worthless land. Mr. President, I want you to hear what Mark Twain said, and you've read that, of course, Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, and Mark Twain, who is Samuel Clemens, took a tour of Palestine in 1867. This is how he described that land, and we're talking about Israel now. He said, this is a quote, "A desolate country whose soil is rich enough but is given over wholly to weeds, a silent, mournful expanse. We never saw a human being on the whole route. There was hardly a tree or a shrub anywhere. Even the olive and cactus, those fast friends of worthless soil, had almost deserted the country." Now, where was this great Palestinian nation? It didn't exist. It wasn't there. The Palestinians weren't there. Palestine was a region named by the Romans, but at that time it was under the control of Turkey, and there was no large mass of people there because the land would not support them. Now, this is a report that the Palestinian Royal Commission, created by the British, said. It quotes an account of the conditions of the coastal plain along the Mediterranean Sea in 1913. This is the Palestinian Royal Commission. They said, I quote, "The road leading from Gaza to the north was only a summer track, suitable for transport by camels or carts. No orange groves, orchards, vineyards were to be seen until one reached Yavnev village. Houses were mud. Schools did not exist. The western part toward the sea was almost a desert. The villages in this area were few and thinly populated. Many villages were deserted by their inhabitants." So that was 1913. The French author Voltaire described Palestine as a hopeless, dreary place. In short, under the Turks, the land suffered from neglect and low population, and that is a historic fact. The nation became populated by both Jews and Arabs because the land came to prosper when the Jews came back and began to reclaim it. Historically, they began to reclaim it. If there had never been any archaeological evidence at all to support the rights of the Israelis to the territory, it's also important to recognize that other nations in the area have no long-standing claim to the country either. Mr. President, did you know that Saudi Arabia wasn't created until 1913? Lebanon until 1920. Iraq didn't exist as a nation until 1932. Syria until 1941. The borders of Jordan were established in 1946, and Kuwait in 1961. Any of these nations who would say that Israel is only a recent arrival would have to deny their own rights as recent arrivals as well. They did not exist as countries. They were all under control of the Turks. So historically, Israel gained its independence in 1948.